What's going on, people? It's your boy NGS, back at it with another video. Now, the topic for today's discussion, if you guys are watching this on the day it's uploaded, November 10th, 2021, marks the 1-year anniversary since the launch of the Xbox Series consoles. It's officially been 365 days since the Xbox Series X and its little brother, the little man, Xbox Series S, have come out. So I thought, what better way to commemorate such an incredible milestone in an unprecedented time that we are living in than by doing a year in review, where I talk about all the good, all the bad, look forward into the future, and most interestingly, me, myself, and I, my point of view as being a formerly jilted Xbox fan who is now fully invested in an ecosystem, talking about what I think about all of these things going forward. But before we dive into all that fun big picture stuff, I do have to address the elephant in the room, because this past year has been anything but traditional. I don't really need to rehash the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic and what that's done to the world at large, but it has played a major role in the video game industry. Looking at it from the point of view of game development, that's taken the biggest hit out of them all. So many games that we expected to play within the first year or so of these new consoles' lives have been pushed into the future. And all of the things that were being prototyped in the conceptual phases, or maybe they just got off the ground running and they're just really wrapping their heads about what this game is going to be, all of those games have gotten pushed into the further future. So that is something that I do have to mention, because unlike previous generations, we have so much stuff that we're dealing with right now. When you factor in working from home and what that does to creativity, messing with the productivity pipeline, and then just the existential dread that has come with dealing with the pandemic, yeah, shit's serious, y'all. And looking at it from a gamer point of view, obviously we suffered as well. This past year for consoles has been ridiculous. Like, they've been damn near impossible to find. And from the way it's looking, if you listen to executives in these industries and what they have to say, it doesn't seem like it's changing anytime soon. If I had to put money on it, I would say realistically, it's not going to be until 2023 when we are able to go into stores and see these consoles in abundance. We might start seeing them roll out and on store shelves by the end of 2022, but for the foreseeable future, we just got to deal with those random drops online and deal with the scalpers, y'all. But now that we've gotten all that red tape, legal mumbo jumbo out of the way, let's talk about the Xbox console's first year, because what an interesting year it's been. I mean, obviously, all the pandemic stuff played a major role in things, but this has been such a weird year for game consoles, especially Xbox, because this is the first time I've ever seen a console launch with no heavy hitters for the first 10 months of its existence. Like, that never happens. Honestly, it never does. Now, we as console gamers are kind of accustomed to these consoles taking some time to get their stride. It just is what it is, man. Like, let's just look at last generation. The PlayStation 4, it definitely took a few years for it to find its identity and to fire on all cylinders. But when it started dropping games like Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, Horizon, God of War, Spider-Man, like, you guys know. You guys know what that console was able to do. But there were a couple of years where, you know, if you weren't a fan of multiplats, then you really weren't playing anything on PlayStation. But one of the benefits is that, regardless of that, they still did launch a couple of games. They might not have been the greatest games in the world, but they did launch a couple of games. But when you look over at the Xbox Series consoles, not only was the first year really dry, the launch of the console didn't have anything worthwhile to play. Now, of course, you had a couple of games here and there. You had games that were optimized for the Xbox consoles. In the case of Yakuza Like a Dragon, that was the only place to play the next generation version of that title until a few months later when it finally came out on PlayStation 5. But other than those things, like multiplats looking prettier on Xbox in the beginning, there really wasn't anything that can really push the horsepower of the Xbox Series console. And honestly, that was rather disappointing if you are a gamer who buys new consoles for new experiences. One of the things that Xbox has really fallen back on in this past year, well, it's been two things actually. Number one, Xbox Game Pass, that's its whole separate topic that we'll touch on. But number two, focusing on making the Xbox user experience the best that it's ever been. Now, this is something that Microsoft, I mean, obviously they deserve kudos in the world because Xbox is really good when it comes to listening to community feedback. 9 times out of 10, if you suggest something to Xbox, something that they want to do, and it's feasible, they're going to do that. They started doing that with the Xbox One generation, and now it's here on display in full force with the Xbox Series consoles. All of the quality of life improvements to the Xbox consoles have been absolutely incredible. So it started with Quick Resume being introduced in the console. You guys already know about Quick Resume. It's basically multitasking for a game console, where if you're playing one game, you can easily swap to another game within a couple of seconds. It's really dope. And I understand a lot of people don't view it as a big deal, but trust me, it is a big deal when you don't have Quick Resume on your console. Just the ability to just pause your game whenever, jump into another game, and then come back to that, and then all these other games on top of that. It's a dope feature, and they've expanded upon it. Quick Resume has received a couple of updates. First update earlier on was the fact that you can see how many games you have in Quick Resume, so you can easily toggle between the two of them. And then in addition to that, they doubled the amount of games you can have in Quick Resume. So in the beginning, I believe it was somewhere in the ballpark of 4 to 5 games in Quick Resume. And then later on, it's jumped up to 8 or 9 games. I don't know why people would have that many games in Quick Resume, but it is seriously something dope, man. It's something that, you know, you don't really think about until you experience it and you're just like, yo, that is awesome, man. And in addition to that, another major quality of life feature that was included with Xbox in this year was FPS boost. So similar to how Xbox has been really great with backwards compatibility and boosting the resolution for a lot of those games, the next logical step was to boost the performance of the games. Now, this is something that was kind of, you know, we always talk about it in theory that maybe it could work, but considering consoles are closed off boxes, the odds of it ever happening were slim to none until this man, Jason Ronald, and his beautiful beard said, nah, I shall grant y'all FPS boost. So it started with boosting OG Xbox One games from 30 frames to 60, and then in some situations they took it to a whole different level by boosting games from 60 frames to 120 FPS, and the list just keeps on growing, man. Now, unfortunately, one of the downsides about FPS boost is that we don't really have any type of roadmap of sorts of what games are going to be boosted in the future, when they're going to get boosted. It's just a situation where they update it on the Xbox blog, we wake up to it on a Monday morning, and it's like, hey, look, all of these games have been boosted. So it's something that you really don't think about, but the more you think about it, you just want more of it. Because while it's great that we're boosting Xbox One games, I want them to take it one step further and start boosting Xbox 360 titles, man. Because one of the cool parts about the backwards compatibility is that some of these games that used to render at like 540p sub HD, they're now 1080p, 1440p, and in some situations 4K. Just imagine a game like Red Dead Redemption, which as of this recording does not have a proper remaster or remake. It's not available on PC where we can take advantage of the hardware. Imagine that game that's already beautiful at 4K. Imagine that game getting boosted to 60 frames on top of that. I would never play any other game ever again. Well, actually, no, that's a lie because I did like Arthur Morgan more than John Marston. So fingers crossed in the future we see more updates to FPS Boost. There were literally so many features and quality of life updates that they did in the span of 12 months than some companies do in their entire existence. I'm looking at you, Nintendo. Not only did we get FPS Boost, Quick Resume updates, cloud gaming being available to everybody, but they started retroactively adding features to older consoles. So like I mentioned earlier, how Xbox is focusing on the ecosystem being its priority rather than just one console, cloud gaming is a major part of that. That's how they want to reach as many gamers as feasibly possible, and that's how you do it when you take away the barrier of entry. And for some people out there, it's spending a couple $100s on consoles. But if you can subscribe to Game Pass and you don't really care about latency and you can play from the comfort of your smartphone, that is a potential market right there. And that's what they started doing with xCloud, launching in so many different territories. I'm interested to see what that does for the future, and if a lot of people start talking about their experiences with gaming from a streaming perspective. But I'd be lying if me, myself, and I wasn't particularly intrigued by the concept of cloud streaming. But one of my biggest barriers has always been the latency attached to it. I'll always be team hardware, team local, team download 100% of the time. But having xCloud as an option definitely made things interesting. And it wasn't until they started really focusing on xCloud and updating the server blades and all those things that I finally started to see why cloud gaming could potentially be another way to play games. Because latency was always my biggest barrier. But they've brought down the latency enough to the point where I could actually have a competent gaming experience. Of course, I'm not going to play anything that requires crackerjack timing, so a shooter or a racer or a fighting game, I'm not going to be playing that on streaming. But something that is very low key, so take a JRPG. Let's talk about Dragon Quest. Let's talk about Octopath Traveler. Games that don't really require you to have the most precise input. Turn-based titles. I found myself playing Octopath Traveler on streaming more than I did on my console, and that's because it's just really convenient. And the fact that there is no fear of the latency, it made it a fun time. And I'd be interested and curious to see what other people's perspectives are, people who have had more luck with streaming than myself. Comment down below and let me know, especially if you live in other territories where it's really hard to get the consoles, not because of a scarcity issue, but because of the cost. That's another thing people forget about. Paying a monthly subscription service is exponentially cheaper than buying a console where, if you talk about the exchange rates, they might be paying double, triple what I would pay here in America. That's a big factor. And then something else that is just so weird, they didn't need to do this, but they are. Xbox has sort of found a way around the cross-gen thing. Now, obviously, a couple of their games are still going to be cross-gen. Forza Horizon 5, cross-gen. Halo Infinite, cross-gen. It's just how the development started. But what they've started doing is offering Xbox Cloud streaming of the series titles to Xbox One owners. So if you're somebody who takes a while to upgrade their consoles, maybe financially, or you just want to wait for new games to come out, the ability to stream something like Starfield on your console, if you have really good internet, that's interesting. I don't know how many people are going to do that, but just the ability to, not have the new hardware, but be able to play the new games, and with that technology and it's actually functional, I can't wait to see some of the reports as far as that's concerned. But that technology doesn't just apply to the old consoles, it's also for the new ones too. It's still rolling out, so it's going to be a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two for everybody to get this, but being able to test out a game via xCloud streaming. So like, let's say, for example, you're interested in checking out the next Gears of War game, right? You never played any other Gears of War title, but this one looks really interesting to you because maybe they have this really dope feature. I don't know. I'm just making things up right now, y'all. Just the ability to test it out for 5-10 minutes to get a feel of the game and what it's all about. That's really cool, man. Xbox, like I always say, they are the company that gives you options as a consumer. So you can play the game locally on your console, you can play it on your PC, you could stream it on your phone, you could stream it on your consoles, or you can do a taste test thing where you're not necessarily playing the game to play it streaming, but you can see if you'll end up liking the game so you don't have to waste bandwidth or waste your time downloading it. You're going to get used to me saying that's pretty awesome in this video. Just is what it is. But I know what you guys are saying. Quality of life improvements, while they are incredible, they are not the main reason why people buy consoles. People buy consoles for new games. If the games are the cake, then quick resume and FPS boost are the icing and sprinkles on top. I understand that, and while yes, the past year has been incredibly lacking for the Xbox brand, they have done something that sort of softened the blow of sorts in a really weird way, and that comes with Xbox Game Pass. Now, Xbox Game Pass is something that they've had in development for the longest time. It launched back in 2017 on the Xbox One, curated list of games, low monthly cost. You can play all the Xbox titles day and date. Now, back then in 2017, it didn't really seem like that interesting of an idea because, well, Xbox didn't really have a lot of games worth talking about back then. But in this past year, we have seen two things happen to Game Pass and what's made it such an insane value proposition. The first being the acquisition of Bethesda. The second all of the deals Xbox has been striking with third-party publishers. So let's talk about the first one, the Bethesda acquisition. It actually happened a few weeks before the launch of Xbox Series consoles, but the Xbox Bethesda acquisition, that merger, that beautiful culmination of all these years working together. A lot of people view that as, oh, Xbox just needs to buy more studios, so that's why they're doing that. And while that is true, it did bolster their studio count up to 20 plus and even more teams on top of that. I don't believe that was the reason why they bought Bethesda. Because if it was just them buying Bethesda to try to get more people to buy Xbox consoles, it really wouldn't make sense, because a lot of those Bethesda games were multi-plat, and most of them, I'm just being real, sold better on other platforms by comparison to Xbox. But why would Xbox buy a whole publisher? Not just one developer, an entire publisher. It's because they need to bolster the Xbox Game Pass output. And this is where things get really interesting, because Xbox Game Pass, while it is a fantastic service, it wasn't until the Bethesda acquisition that people got excited about the potential of Game Pass, because when you factor in all of those teams working on multiple games, then you could start getting a glimpse into the future Xbox is trying to craft. Because one of the main reasons why that Xbox Bethesda deal was able to go through was because Xbox had the backing of Microsoft. Now, I know what y'all are saying. Well, Neo, Xbox is owned by Microsoft, so of course they'd have the cash flow to justify them purchasing Bethesda. They didn't have access to that cash flow until the past year or so, and I gotta credit the big man himself, Phil Spencer, for that. Phil Spencer, when he took over the Xbox brand, he's turned things around in so many different ways. Now, obviously, if we're talking about game output, we're not going to start seeing those until this year and onwards. But in terms of laying the groundwork, the foundation for the future to come, and more specifically, convincing the right people in charge about Game Pass, Phil Spencer has done a really good job, because for the first time in the entire console's history, Xbox has the backing of Microsoft. Y'all might remember a few months back, there was this video talking about, just the Xbox, xCloud initiative, all that good stuff. But it wasn't just Phil talking about it. It was also the head of Microsoft himself, Satya Nadella. Now, yes, people can view that as, oh, well, they just wanted this big corporate executive to come on here and talk good about Xbox. But how many times has a corporate executive come out and talked about Xbox to gamers? I'm talking about Microsoft, who really, they just let Xbox do their thing. How many times does that really happen? And to say that Xbox has the full backing of Microsoft, that means that Phil Spencer did something that Microsoft finds valuable. And by that, I mean he created a subscription service that has garnered a lot of excitement and hype. And what is one thing that major corporations love seeing? They love seeing engagement, they love seeing reoccurring revenue, and they love seeing excited people. So if that is a market that Microsoft wants to tap into, of course they have no problems paying billions of dollars for an entire publisher. Of course they have no problem, just opening up the bank, opening the checkbook, and just saying, here's a blank check, do what you got to do to get the numbers up. They're not going to have any problem with that whatsoever. And that is why they were able to purchase Bethesda, because if they do really want to grow Game Pass to this insane number where they can have people gaming on consoles, on PC, and now via their mobile phones with xCloud, they need to have the content. And before the Bethesda acquisition, they did not have the content. And now with the Bethesda acquisition, they have so much content going forward into the future. And that's not even counting how some of their studios now are working on multiple games at the same time. We could theoretically see a major blockbuster game dropping on Game Pass every 3 months. And in addition to that, we can start seeing smaller games drop on the service throughout that time frame. But every 3 months to have a major, huge selling title on Xbox Game Pass and then everything else sprinkled in between, that potentially could be a major power play in the gaming industry. Because where else have you ever seen such an influx of content on a consistent basis in one ecosystem? More often than not, these companies, they usually drop 1 or 2 big games a year, and then fingers crossed they can do the same next year. But to just have that consistent output and that diversity of the lineup and how the games aren't just tied to one platform, you can play it literally everywhere they have Game Pass, that's pretty awesome. Now, of course, all that talk is speculative. We don't know exactly how this is going to play in the grand scheme of things. I would love for it to be a success because I want every single game to be a success if it's a very well, competently made game. But we're just going to have to see with such an unproven model in the video game industry. Are consumers going to react to it more than the initial launch hype? Because right now everyone is in the honeymoon phase. They love their next generation consoles. They love Game Pass. This is awesome. But are they going to still feel the same later down the road if some of these games aren't really that great? Because it's one thing if a game comes out and it's amazing and people love it. But if you start getting a consistent stringer of not so great games, that subscription price that you pay, is it really going to be worth it? So time is definitely going to tell. But as it stands right now, it's an exciting prospect nevertheless. So time is a major factor in whether or not this Game Pass gamble does pay off. But if there is something that we can latch onto right now that can show that people are really invested, it has to do with how Microsoft is handling third-party relations on Game Pass. Because this past year, more than the first-party offerings, we have seen so many game deals on Game Pass. I'm talking about games launching day and date on Game Pass that are on other platforms. Games launching exclusively on Xbox Game Pass that aren't on other platforms. I'm talking about games that previously were never on an Xbox console suddenly getting announced, and then boom, they're coming to Game Pass. Two games in particular that come to mind from earlier on in the year: MLB The Show 21 and Outriders. Both games coming out that launched day and date on Game Pass that honestly lit the world on fire for their respective times that they were out, because nobody knew that they were going to do this. Because in the case of Outriders, that was a $60 game, and they launched that day and date on Game Pass. And I'm sure that Game Pass bolstered a lot of its numbers in getting people into that game when the game worked, because as many of y'all know, Outriders had a lot of server issues, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that they didn't anticipate so many people enjoying the demo and then the influx of Game Pass people. I'm not so sure, but yeah, that definitely, while it was great, it was on the service of the game itself. Woo! But MLB The Show 21, that game franchise was never on Xbox. It was exclusive to PlayStation. And then it gets announced for Xbox. And then not only that, it's day and date on Game Pass, while people on PlayStation had to pay $70. That's a big dick energy kind of move, man. Like, not only is Xbox getting a PlayStation franchise, but it's launching on this service and you can play it for peanuts, while these people got to pony up not $60, but $70. That's a slap in the face, I'm gonna be honest. Not only that, most recently, we had the launch of Back 4 Blood, a game that's really big, multiplayer-focused title, launched day and date on Game Pass, and then a whole bunch of other games coming out, like Psychonauts 2, a multi-platform title, launching day and date on Game Pass. We had Octopath Traveler randomly dropping on Xbox. I remember they announced that, what was it, like the beginning of March, and it's like, oh yeah, it's also gonna be on Game Pass too. Like, who was really checking for Octopath Traveler? It's like that game came out on the Switch, they ported it to PC, no one was checking for it, and then boom, it's coming to Game Pass. Like, those are the type of deals that get people excited. Like, every single Monday they wake up and they're like, oh my God, there's this Game Pass drop that's coming out. Holy crap, all these games I've never heard about, I can finally play it. And that is what is going to get people excited and subscribed to the service. The fact that they keep putting out these interesting titles. Now, you might not really care for the titles that come out on a monthly basis, but every now and then you're gonna get a title you're just like, damn, that game is like $60 and I can get it for the subscription price. Sure, I'll definitely pony up the money for that month and I'll play it. And sure enough, here comes another month's drops. Like, we're going into the first year anniversary, and what is one of the games that's going to be coming out the same week? Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. It's part of a collection that you can't buy the games individually, but you get with the most popular game in the service day and date on Game Pass. That's freaking awesome. So obviously Game Pass is a major player in Xbox's ecosystem going forward. Honestly, I feel like Game Pass is becoming the platform and Xbox is just the brand where you can access Game Pass. Because as many of y'all know, Xbox is steering away from the traditional ideas of exclusive. You know, the days of buying one console to play one game and that's the only place you can play it, those days are done for Microsoft. They see the writing on the wall, and a lot of other companies are starting to see that too. Sony is not immune to that. They've started putting their games on PC, and time frame's getting shorter and shorter. But Xbox has fully adopted it, so you can play the games on PC, you can play it on your consoles, and now with the advent of cloud streaming, you can play the games from the comfort of your smartphone. So it's all about access to this ecosystem rather than just gatekeeping it to one console. Because if a game is legitimately good and you give people more options to play the game, what do you think that's going to do for the game's sales? Forza Horizon 5, while it's still in early access right now, by the time this video releases, it'll be available to the masses. That game is charting like no tomorrow, and that has to do with the fact that it's available on both Xbox consoles, on Xbox's PC app, in addition to being available on Steam. So while it's not exclusive in the traditional senses, I'm sure Microsoft is definitely happy with the influx of new players and all that revenue. So now that we've gotten all the Game Pass talk out of the way, let's talk about some of the games that Xbox has released throughout the course of the year, or should I say, throughout the past 4 months or so, because really all of the major Xbox games that people have been talking about didn't start releasing until post E3. The console launched with nothing. It had one game come out within like the first 3 months. That game, of course, was The Medium. Moving right along. So from the launch of the series consoles up into, I want to say, August or so, it was really dry. But around E3 2021, we started to see the future of Xbox, or should I say, when you finally can play some new games on your series consoles with the 6 in 6 marketing slogan. And by that, I'm talking about for the next 6 months, Xbox will be launching 6 major titles to the platform. Games like Microsoft Flight Simulator, 12 Minutes, Psychonauts 2, which I know is kind of an outlier because it did launch on PlayStation and it was a crowdfunding game. But if there is something I will give them credit, Xbox, when they acquired Double Fine Productions, they did add a boost of funding to that game. So they were able to do things that they originally weren't going to with their limited funding. So I'll give them a pass on that one. And then most recently, we saw the release of Forza Horizon 5, which, as you guys can see, I'm playing it in the background, and that game is... it's Forza Horizon 5. I mean, we all love it. And closing out the year, we have one of the biggest games of the year. It was supposed to be a marquee title for the series launch last year. We have Halo Infinite. Now, obviously, this is being recorded before the launch of Halo Infinite, so we do not know exactly how this game is going to pan out. But there are a couple of things that happened this year for Halo Infinite that were more positive as opposed to last year's showcase. We finally got our hands with a multiplayer flight test. We actually got a couple of them, and yeah, I mean, you guys have seen my impressions already. Halo Infinite plays like a dream. It's awesome, and I can't wait to see where they take this game in the future. Fingers crossed, the launch is solid. Now all that leaves is the campaign, and unfortunately, we still have not seen anything extensive from the campaign. We did get a little overview video that was about 6 minutes that showed you bits and pieces of things, but I'm one of those people that I don't really like sizzle reels for something that's as important of a campaign, especially for something that we're all still kind of on the fence about after last summer's showing. But from what I have seen, the graphics are definitely improved. It feels like Halo in terms of adding in more of the quirky aspects that we love. And it just looks more polished and refined compared to last year. But again, time will definitely tell with how this more open-ended Halo campaign with objectives and all these things you could do, how that stuff is going to play a role. It remains to be seen if all that stuff is going to work out on release. And unfortunately, we got a really bad update in regards to Halo Infinite this year with the delays of both Forge and co-op campaign. Now, I understand, like I said, we're living in a pandemic, and, you know, shit happens in game development. It is what it is. But the fact that you're launching such a major title, one that built Xbox, without campaign co-op, honestly, that's kind of strange. You know, I get it. A lot of people prefer to play the game solo. I get it. A lot of people would rather focus on the multiplayer. That's fine. But campaign co-op is in Halo's DNA. Whether it's split screen or whether it's playing online with your boys, there's just something that you can't get by playing the Halo games solo dolo on Legendary. You need to play that with your squad. And the fact that we're not going to be able to do that until like their first update on the roadmap, which is like what, 3-4 months down the road, it's not a long time. But for a game that was supposed to launch last year and a game that they've been working on for 5+ years, it's something that we got to address. This is not an indie studio, guys. This is 343 with the backing of the biggest corporation in the world. There's a certain bar of quality, and you can't dispute that. And the last bit that I did want to touch on for Xbox's year in review, and how could we forget this because they actually started off the year with this you guys know me, I don't mince words, one of the dumbest decisions of all time. There was the Xbox Live Gold price hike. Yes, I know it seems like it was many a moon ago, but that did indeed happen in 2021, where they, for whatever reason, decided to get rid of the $60 a year gold option. And if you wanted to subscribe to Xbox Live Gold, you had to deal with paying $10 a month. And $10 a month times 12 equals $120 a year to play your games online. Now, right then and there, if you're looking at it from the point of view of paying to play online, $60 a year, sure, we don't want that, especially with lackluster games of gold, but people deal with it because that's how it's been for 16 years. But if you're telling me that you increase that service from 60 to 120 and there's no added benefit to it, you got me all the way fucked up, man. And I don't care how many controllers y'all put out, that should not have happened. I understand that some people think it's all a big conspiracy, that they were doing this just to get a lot of goodwill, but what company that has already received a lot of flack from gamers in the past, from Red Ring of Death to just the Xbox One existing, what company would want to bring all that unnecessary controversy? I refuse to believe that. I just think it was one of those things where they just decided to quietly remove it and try to funnel people into the value that's associated with Xbox Game Pass. Because Xbox Game Pass, if you're not doing the trick, it costs $15 a month for the ultimate subscription, and that equals out to $180 a year. So if you're paying $120 a year for gold and there's Game Pass for $180 and you get access to all these games for $60 more, why wouldn't you want to do that service? Come on, guys, just that extra $60, pony it up, man. Go for that. Give us that reoccurring revenue. I don't care what people say, whatever excuse they wanted to do to justify that insane price hike, but you don't do that. You don't try to pimp out the benefits of a service. Two services that you run concurrently, you don't try to pimp that out by increasing the price of a cheaper service to damn near the price of that better service and making people choose like, hey, look, this is where all the fun stuff is happening. You don't want this, man, because it's like literally creating the problem and selling people the solution. That's literally what it is, man. Thankfully, they did reverse course within a matter of 24 hours, but still, it's the fact that nobody at Xbox, from a leadership level to people on the ground level, janitorial staff, nobody thought about the potential consequences that would come from that decision. Because, bro, just thinking about it is just so asinine. And I know this wasn't meant to be a whole rant about it, but seriously, how do you come on here saying that, we're for the consumers, Game Pass this, value that, ecosystem, whatever, and then you go and do that? Like that, it just goes to show you that these corporations are not your friend, people, because at the drop of the hat, they'll do something like that. And you just know that nobody looked this shit up beforehand, because normally when you look at the Xbox blog, like when they're posting like, oh, here's this update here, it'd usually be signed off by like Major Nelson or Phil Spencer, maybe Sarah Bond, like those type of people. This update about Xbox Live Gold, it just said like, sincerely, the Xbox team, or something along those lines. They knew if they tried to attach a name onto that, it would be World War fucking 3, 4, and 5 rolled up into a matter of a week. Thankfully, they buckled and they reversed this decision, but still, it was not a good look, and it's something that definitely should not have happened to a company that spent the past 5 years trying to win back the consumers, get a lot of goodwill in their ecosystem, and then to go and do something like that literally 2 months after people bought these new consoles. It's not cool, man. It's not cool. And that about wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. That was my year in review for the 1-year birthday of the Xbox Series consoles. Again, it's absolutely insane to think that an entire year has passed, but it's been a really interesting year, man. It's been a really exciting year, and I know some people are going to take some of the flack that I gave Xbox in this video. They're going to take that to heart, but never forget, all of that stuff is coming from a really good place, especially from a person who is now someone who's excited about the future of Xbox, which is something I couldn't say for the past decade or so. And just look what happens. Look what happens when you get competent leadership. Look what happens when you start doing exciting things. You win back consumers. So if there is one particular word that I want to use to describe this past year of Xbox, it would be foundation. They've laid the groundwork for the future. They've conditioned us to the idea of what to expect going forward. And that's what we're going to get in the future. So while it might seem like I'm hard on them at times, it's coming from a good place, y'all. It's coming from a place of excitement and not wanting to screw up this momentum. Because as we've seen before in the past, it's very easy, extremely easy for companies to, feel like their shit don't stink. We see it all the times. It's happened to Nintendo repeatedly. It's happened to PlayStation repeatedly. And it's happened to Xbox before. This past generation, it happened to Xbox. So the last thing I want them to do is just, get a big head about stuff like, oh yeah, we got Game Pass, we got all these people, we got folks who are going to do all these videos and podcasts. Like, what do we got to worry about? It's not the people you already have in your ecosystem who have been supporters of Xbox since day one. It's the people you need to win over. You're talking about the Neos in the world, the NeoGameSparks. God, it's so weird referring to myself, but it's people like me who spent a whole generation, almost 2 generations, not really gaming on Xbox. From 2012 to 2020, that's about 8 years, y'all. And just look what happened in the manner of a year and a half. So much has happened. And that's something that I want Xbox to focus on going forward. Keep listening to the community. Keep giving us all these great features and additions. Give us a competent DVR system. Please, Jason Ronald and your magnificent beard, if you don't do anything else this year, if all you do is sit and watch football, please just give us a better DVR system. I love you, bro. And speaking of things that I want to see, I want to hear from you guys. Comment down below and let me know what you thought about the first year of these Xbox consoles. Were you guys able to pick up an Xbox console? If so, which one did you get? The Series X or the Series S? Or were you like me and you just got both because Xbox is awesome? Comment down below some of your favorite games that you've played this year. In addition, I want to hear from the people who haven't picked up an Xbox console. What did you guys think about Xbox's first year from an outside perspective? Are you guys interested in the future of Xbox? Let me know. And last, but certainly not least, I want to hear some of y'all's favorite games that you played in the past year. What were some of the games that were surprise hits for you? Games you didn't expect to be fire, but they ended up being absolutely amazing. Maybe some of your potential disappointments. Comment down below and let me know. And last, but certainly not least, for those asking, yes, I will be doing a video covering the first year of the PlayStation 5. That video will be coming out in the next couple of days, so make sure y'all are subscribed to the channel to check it out. And for me to you for now, my name is NGS signing out, and like always, I will catch you guys later. Peace.